This is the Business Emergency Room, and typically we talk triage a lot. Today, we're going to look at things from the angle of the doctor's perspective. Today, I want to talk about the money. Not the tax angle. We're looking at your business through the eyes of the outsider with the money in hand. Your investors or an investor, a buyer or a financier, or somebody, an analyst, who maybe just is looking to put a sticker on your business saying approved, above average, best buy. I worked a lot of exits over the years. Good ones, many bad ones, painful ones, successful ones. There are so many lessons to be learned from that process at what ails businesses that I feel would be so useful to have so much earlier than at that stage. So today's core question is, how do these external money holders value your business versus how you value it? What is the gap? And what does it say about your business health? Leadership today isn't just about scaling. It's about navigating constant uncertainty, market disruptions, and high-pressure decisions. If you're dealing with chaos, bottlenecks, and relentless pressure, welcome to the Business Emergency Room. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. I'm glad you're here. We are going to talk about why using what we learn from business exits and mergers and acquisitions, and how to use what we learn from those to manage my and your business today. The fact is that in any mergers or acquisitions or in any exits, it's one of the potentially few significant times that external eyes come into your business to make their evaluation of the value of your business. And so the way they look and test and measures is different than those who are leading the business, us, are doing today. And there is typically discrepancy in that. It's interesting to look with that external perspective at your business and see how that maybe is different from where you are today, because that's where the room for improvement lies. The reason why this matters, even if you're not selling or if you are not necessarily interested in what the external verdict may be, outsider value perception really touches everything and matters to your business today, because it will affect your ability to set up functional long-term supply agreements and buying decisions. Your clients and customers look at your business similarly. Your board or investor confidence in leadership is associated with their perception of the value of the business today and what they know about other businesses and similar businesses that they're involved with. So they're always comparing you to others and comparing you to market and comparing you to market factors. It will affect your insurance rates and your financing terms. And it will also impact your team morale and how employees feel about the business. Because your employees are inside the business, but do not see or the business the same way as you see it at the top typically, and might have quite a different perspective on the value of the business today, or might be subjected to an outsider's perspective on the value of the business today. So this episode is about a perspective shift, and we're going to use 10 lenses that outsiders apply. And in this case, the outsiders who look at a business from a money and value perspective. We're going to use their lenses to look at our business and do a bit of a self-diagnosis or self-assessment. You can use these to use kind of a hold up a mirror and spot holes, tighten your operations, and increase real payable value. If you are like me, typically listening to a podcast in the car, I would invite you to listen to these lenses and give yourself a scale. Make it an odd numbered scale. I do not want you to be able to score everything average or in the middle. So an even numbered scale. I want you to be scaling yourself at a little bit above average or below average, or a lot above or below average, something like that. So maybe listen to this podcast or those 10 lenses with that in mind. Of course, when you are evaluating your business or looking for the value in your business, there are benchmarks and there is hard performance data. So there are definitely things in your business that you can measure, but that's a number. And that number becomes really only a value, a business value, after risk and evidence and defensibility are priced in. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, that number is the number today, but because of what underpins that, right? What makes it that way, and what makes it that tomorrow it's also still that way or not that way? What evidence do you have to support that other than because I say so? And how strong is that? How defensible is that? Or defensible is maybe a very negative word, but if you would, if you're one of your more cynical friends, if you would present this evidence to one of your most cynical friends, would they kind of say, yeah, I give you that, right? It's out of your head. It's not because you said so. I can actually see that this is likely or reasonably to be true. I buy that. Pun intended. So those three words, risk, evidence, and defensibility, are where subjectivity enters. We definitely suffer as leaders, even if we are not the ultimate owner of the business, of the endowment effect, right? This is a bias humans have. We tend to overvalue what we own. So if you are running the business, if you're a leader of a business, you might not own it, but typically you have a level and a sense of ownership that would still put you at risk of this endowment effect. There's also a myth that how your business's value is also then ultimately the sales price. For this episode, that's not so relevant because I'm assuming here we're not talking exits. I'm pitching here this method to use to evaluate the current health of your business, and use it as an improvement tool. And so we can talk about that some other times. Because what is the value you realize in the current shape? If you sell a business, it might be merging or working under a slightly different operating system and owners with slightly different systems. And so the value in its current shape is not the value in its new shape. And so valuation is not necessarily the same as what you can sell your business for, or a different episode. So there are lots of sobering statistics around business valuations. Just something for purposes of today to be mindful of is that more than half of any mergers and deals and sales in business sales fail. And that the vast majority, 80% or even more, maybe even closer to 90 of those deals that fail, the main comment is that there is major misalignment on valuation. So yes, definitely a subjective factor, and something that maybe not enough people spend enough time on, because almost all business owners say that they actually don't know their company's value. And maybe that rate is slightly improving. But yeah, it's a majority. It's until we get to the point where we're ready to exit, this is not something we spend time on. So maybe that's why it's interesting to do. So let's get to the 10 lenses at which people look at your business to say, what is the value of that business if I would need to assess that. Most people who come and look at the value of your business have a finance background. That's not where I start. So I'll start with the people, because to me, that's always number one. People. Somebody externally will look at your people and say, if you take out the current leadership, would these people stay? Are they staying for the culture, the business as a whole, or are they there because they are attached to certain individuals? Then who do you have? If this is still the team you built the business with, you may have still some of those people in your organization that are doing 3 jobs. We all know those people. That might work for you, but an outsider does not value that, because that's not sustainable. And if somebody else would look at your business and say, okay, I would be paying for 3 people to do that job. This might be the current setup, but that's not how it would work for me. Yeah. So that's important. And how happy and aligned and resilient is the team, right? So do you have staff surveys? Do you have material and evidence beyond because I say so? And would that be backed up by how your employees respond to questions or talk about their place of work that showcases there is a healthy, steady state culture? A healthy and happy working environment. Then you, right? The second lens is the leadership. Still on the people. How dependent is the business on this specific leadership team, right? So not the roles of CEO and CFO. No, about John as CEO and Sophie as CFO. How dependent is a business on having specifically you in those positions? How dependent are the contracts and the strategic relationships this business have on specific leaders? Would they actually be transferable? Are they attached to the business and the performance of the business, or are they attached to the individuals in there? How much delegation do you or do you not do? Can you go on leave? Have you had a holiday recently? Does the business fall apart if certain individuals are not there? Or would be replacing you with a highly capable functional leader, maybe, blow a slightly different wind through the organization, but still make this business successful. Then 3. The next thing somebody externally would look at is cultures and systems and ways of working. We talked about culture already a little bit. Does your business stand as an entity? And of course, we've all been told to not look at businesses that way, right? The business is its people in it. But you know what I mean. We've all been to these situations where businesses have changed hands, and whatever the beating heart was of the business before, that heart seems to have completely disappeared after. Is there a heart in your business that's in your business and is robust and there and will keep beating because you have standard operating procedures and ways of working, and it's structured and documented? Did you, in your growth, get out of that phase where it's done the way whoever started that job decided to do it? Can people go on leave? Can people help each other out with each other's jobs? Is there some common language and ways of working that take the misalignment out of the system? Do people, if somebody, and a good way to look at it is if you move resources around, or if you need to cover somebody on leave, do people, or somebody new comes in, do they need to spend months shadowing how somebody else does it so that they can catch all the intricacies? Or can they bring with them some standard operating procedures to do certain jobs and then learn the nuances of how it works in your organization and get to know their fellow team members and be effective reasonably quickly? All right. For those finance people amongst you, yes, when I'll get to the numbers, typically this might be number 1. For me, it's number 4. What then will be looked at is the financial metrics and the rigor, right? Do you have clean books? Do you have timely management reports? Do you have usable performance data? How audit ready are you? If somebody wants to see something or wants to see a report or wants to see some numbers, even if you might not want to share it with them, could you pull it together reasonably quickly? Or would it be the mammoth task to put some of that together? Are you actually using the numbers to steer your business? Have you been happy to invite or happy as happy as you will be about that? Have you been happy to have auditors in over the years? Have you responded to that? Have you made it clean through some external reviews, right? 5, revenue quality and the growth pattern. So this is looking at what you made beyond the financials in a bit more detail. Your income, is it recurring? Is it predictable? Or do you have a lot of one-off hunting in there? Does your team perpetually have huge sales targets because every year you need to start over bringing in new business? Or is it more on the other side? Are you overly dependent on a few clients? Do you have healthy and steady growth? Or do you have, that's typically looked at as positive, or do you have actually no growth? Or steady lines with some weird peaks? Or do you have explosive growth that usually sets some alarm bells off too, right? So if people would look at your performance data from a sales perspective, does that look normal, or does it immediately would solicit further questions? And if the further questions come, are there some logical, defensible answers why your patterns look unusual? And do you have overdependency either way on anything or anyone? And how much of the past performance, how much is the past performance a good prediction for the future, right? How is that a good indicator of stability and visibility into the forward revenue? Do you know where it came from, and what were the results based on the work you put in, or did you somehow manage to cobble together the results you had, but maybe they were not a direct result of what you put in? Then bringing that to those who got you that revenue, your customer base and your concentration, that is 6. What does your customer base look like? Do you have some big whales in there? Or are you chasing big whales? Are you chasing, or do you have 1 or 2 major customers on which you're very dependent? Are you bending over backwards unsustainably for some specific clients? Do you have a weird mix of customers that have very different service patterns and that actually make it difficult to service everybody well, because what your big clients need and your small clients need is very different? How much of those clients really are your ideal client profile, or do you happen to have a somewhat random collections of the client you happen to be able to get? Deep down, you know the answers to those, and somebody who looks under the hood of your business will also see the indicators of what's perceived as healthy and not healthy. So having a look at how would an outsider look at your client base and what will be their verdict on there, I think that's something you can answer. It may be, I've had definitely clients in somewhat unusual businesses where they've had an uniquely qualified, really big client, right? So a big client who is you're so integrated that them switching to somebody else is super hard, or it's almost impossible to source from somebody else. Okay, if that's the case, I'll give you that. If you actually can show me how you protected around the risks associated with that, if you can show me the evidence that you know that you're aware of that, and that you've been managing accordingly, and hence that relationship is sustainable going forward. Because it comes back to the risk perceived with that relationship, right? So And then we get onto the other side of that coin: suppliers, partners, ecosystems. What is your supply chain health, your vendor terms? Are you known in the market as somebody who pays well, as somebody who's easy to work with, as somebody who is trustworthy? Are you a steady state performer in this space? And or what is your process around vetting your vendors and checking their health and well-being? And what are you everybody's friend and willing to wheel and deal with everybody, or do you take some care in selecting your partnerships wisely? Inventory control to me is also a big part of that. I think we could spend whole episodes on that, because I've seen businesses lose so much money on this, particularly in fast growing businesses. There's typically initially not a whole lot of effort and attention for inventory control. And there's a lot of quick wheeler dealer, last minute wheeler dealing with suppliers. And so paperwork isn't always there or in order, or tracked or kept in the right places, or is coming later and then not really managed. And then suddenly, steadily, the business has been growing for a few years, and suddenly there is actually a lot of inventory. And if you look at the dollars attached to it, that's not nothing. But remember, particularly with hardware, even if it's new with tag and sits in the box, it's not like at Amazon you can send it back and get the exact value back. Because if you did not do tracking and tracing, etc., or store things in the right place, somebody else will not pay that value for it, right? The resale value is not what it is. And even the value to you may not remain what it is, because using product like that in your final product might actually land you in trouble. So think on your supply chain health also about inventory control. Just happen to have a lot of scars in that area. And hence talking about that a little more than needed, maybe. Let's get on to the less tangible stuff. You also have a lot of things that have value that are definitely more in the subjective category. So think of your brand goodwill, your customer trust, any IP you might have. If you say that they're worth a lot to you because either they're a key differentiator or they're a moneymaker, can you show it? If they're a moneymaker, like maybe you have licenses and hence your IP, then it's of course less tangible, right? Because you actually have numbers, and so it's easier to provide evidence. If it's a differentiator that's less tangible, do you then have documentation that shows customers keep returning to you? Do you have that feedback from them? Do you have the data to back it up? And this is important to review at any point in time, because this is one where I think the potential for internal misalignment can also be huge. Does your team know, even, and specifically your newer people, do they know the value of these things and how to leverage these assets and use them for business success? I think you can use this topic as a conversation to uncover gaps and misalignments and improvements most definitely and quite easily. Which brings us to something that is quantifiable but not always expressed so clearly and sometimes hard to talk about, which is owners' perks and hidden cost loads. It's not just owners' perks, it's perks for your people, right? Specifically fast-growing businesses, if they can do well and if they can afford it, I see many smaller businesses do very well, be very generous and kind with perks for owners and employees, right? Around vehicles, around sports tickets, around suites, around maybe upgrades on flights, whatever it is that you choose to have for yourself or for your employees. And if you can afford it and it makes sense to you in the way you operate your business, I'm not saying you should stop it. I'm just saying that if an outsider looks at your business, they might consider some of these things frivolous, right? And so the question is to maybe ask yourself is, okay, if I have a lot of those, do they maybe warrant a review? And did they maybe made sense when you were a smaller organization and everybody was working 140%, and there wasn't always a lot of money, or there was cash to pay out, and this was just a different ways to reward people for all the hard work and the effort that came in. But now you're an organization that's 5-6 times that size in terms of people. Does it create disparity because you're only giving it to some people? Or is this no longer sustainable because everybody has a more normal 9-to-5 life? Something to look at. This is one that typically has some creep in it. And yes, this is also subjective, because you can, of course, also subjectively decide that you want to keep this. That's totally your decision. Just be aware of the value attached to that. And are you also using that, right? So if this is a perk for your employees, is it valued for what you pay for it? And is it sustainable? And then last but not least, number 10 is around future opportunities and growth proof. We've talked already a little bit about past performance and showcasing and evidencing that. This is a forward-looking growth and opportunities. The pipeline of initiatives that are not yet materialized that you're carrying on your books. If somebody else would look at that, would they agree with you of the potential there? What evidence do you have? Did you just put a stake in the ground and said, well, this is what I'd like to achieve, so I'll just put it out as an aspirational goal and we'll see we get there? Or is it actually based on past performance and a decent plan that's resourced? Outsiders don't dismiss upsides, but they'll apply risk based on your track record, right? So how good have you been in the past with implementing these growth opportunities? If you've had a very variable track record, but you have a very positive prognosis on your books, does that make sense? Do you need to look differently at what you promise to the market that you will deliver? Or even does that create friction with your employees around expectations because they are forever chasing these growth and project goals that are not always realized? So are assumptions clear? Is it aligned with what the rest of the industry sees and does, or with current market factors? Are you set up to deliver? So that was my checklist. As I said, for each, I would just have a think, are you below or above average? And then maybe pick some, right? Pick a few where you're like, actually, these questions or this perspective made me a little uncomfortable. I would like to do some more work. Or it didn't necessarily make me uncomfortable, but I see opportunity. I understand, it triggered something. I understand where you're coming from. I think we could actually do more. What is it that you believe? What is the evidence that you can show? And how would a stranger score this based on what you can provide them? Expect to find some inefficiencies, expect to find untapped value, or we've always done it this way kind of stuff. Well, we've always done it this way is ripe for review at times, right? And then instill maybe somewhat of a cadence. I think a review like this fits very well at a quarterly strategy review. It's just a different way to have a discussion about where the room for improvement may lie and come up with some very concrete actions, which everybody loves. Coming out of a strategy review with actual practical stuff, actual gaps to close, definitely will lead to actions. Make sure you prioritize, go after what's most valuable first. And because you looked at it with value lenses, I think that's an easier question to answer. And so in closing, I suggest you do this work to prevent chaos. I also suggest that this is a good piece of work to do when you're starting to feel that there's too many little things happening everywhere all at once that are not good. Because looking at your business this way will help you create an overview of very tangible gaps to close, which then leads to a good discussion. Which things have the most value if you would close them, and hence an easy way to prioritize them, because we're looking at this whole thing through a value lens. And where the gap sits, there is risk. So yeah, that needs attention. As I said, ideal for a quarterly strategy review or an annual strategy review. If you want help facilitating this conversation, that's what I can do. I'll be here for you. Give me a call. Happy to do so. I hope you found a few things to dive into in your own business, and love to hear some feedback on value increases that you are going after as a result of this. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to have you back for a next episode. Thank you. That's it for this episode of the Business Emergency Room. If you are currently dealing with chaos or disruption in your business, please reach out. You can email, text, or call, and I will find a way to connect with you within 24 hours. I've helped others steer out of the storm, and I know I can help you too. Talk soon. Please like, subscribe, and share.